Hey, this is going to be a TvP in the Silver League between Snuck and Mr. Fuzzy, and we'll see. It looks like it's pretty short. So your goal in TvP, like I said, there's two ways to play: a macro game or a timing game. And in TvP, I prefer timing. One base, 10-minute, $3,500, 37 worker timing push is undefeatable in TvP. Like I've said a lot of times, I have about a 90% win ratio, one basing in TvP. And it's really easy to do and all that kind of stuff. But the problem with a timing attack is, as you found, that if you don't macro absolutely perfectly, it doesn't work, right? Like, especially a one base timing attack, because you're usually going to have only 3 buildings, like exactly 3 buildings. So if any of those buildings is ever idle, every idle second of those buildings just adds up, and you end up with a bunch of money that you can never ever spend because you have an exactly perfectly efficient infrastructure. So I don't know if this is going to be a macro game or a timing game. I hope it's going to be a timing game because TvP, man, timing is the way to be. But we'll see. So in a macro game, you count on superior number of workers with good worker saturation and your ability to spend all your money on all, not necessarily on specific things at specific times, but just the ability to spend all your money. And the combination of those two gives you a bigger army, and you can just win over a longer game with a bigger army. Whereas a timing attack, obviously at a specific time you have to have a bigger army. So they're both about having a bigger army. One of them says, I'm going to always have a bigger army from 12 minutes on for the rest of the game. And the other one just says, at exactly 10 minutes, I'm going to have a bigger army than you. So you've found your opponent's base. You see his forge, which is a little bit disturbing. I don't know what to expect when you see an early forge. Probably an early +1 armor and zealots with lots of sentries and maybe cannons on defense. I don't know. Maybe he's just... This is the Silver League. Maybe he's just really afraid of timing attacks. But you got to realize, once you have 2 medevacs and a couple marauders, some tanks, and some banshees and whatever, like, cannons become almost irrelevant, because as long as your army can beat his army, you never have to go in range of the cannons until his army is dead. So you just siege up outside of range of the cannons and wait for him to bring his army over to stop you and kill it. So cannons are more of an I'm afraid of a 7-minute attack than they are useful against a 10 or 15-minute attack. You started with a Hellion, which is the way the build works. The way you can tell if you're doing the build right is just to check benchmarks, and you got to add 100 for the bunker. So at 7 minutes you want to have 1,500, and it doesn't look like you're going to be anywhere close to that. I don't know why I'm lagging so much. What is going on with this lag? It's crazy. So here we go, you're 1,000. Now remember, if you're behind benchmark with this build, you're going to be behind benchmark all game. So it's really scary to be behind benchmark by 400 now, because you're probably still going to be behind benchmark by 400 when you push out. And like I said, with a timing attack, hitting the benchmarks is the most important thing. It's like all that matters. So it's important that in order to pull, you have to pull enough workers, or else you can get destroyed by zealots, and you have to leave enough workers behind, or else you won't have enough to reinforce your push. So that's why it's like a 9.5 to a 10.5 minute timing push, is because you have to wait for that 37 worker benchmark before you can push out in order to pull 16 and leave 22. So it's often tempting to go earlier, especially like if you scout a super fast expansion and you think, or you scout a low sentry count and you think like, oh, I can really get in there and kill him now. It's very tempting to pull workers early and go, but don't do it, man. You gotta have 37 workers, or else pulling workers is gonna cripple your economy. You've supply blocked yourself like 4 times now, it seems like, and you're pushing out, salvaging the bunker really late. You're not gonna be able to spend the money from the salvaged bunker because you salvaged it so late. I would salvage the bunker the second your first air unit comes out, unless you have scouted and not seen an expansion. So now this is dangerous, pushing down with this army before you pull SCVs, because if he fights this army with no SCVs, then later when you pull SCVs, they won't have anyone to repair and they'll be useless. So you really want to pull at the same time as you go. You don't want to be trying to take the midfield like this with a small group of Marines and whatever. This is not the way you should be playing this attack. You want to pull your SCVs and make a ball and walk that ball across the field, so that no matter where he engages, he's always going to get completely overrun by your giant ball with workers. And you need to have been constantly using all 3 buildings, and we've noticed lots of times when you weren't. You need to have like 40 workers now. I guess maybe you cut workers for the expansion, which is okay, but I didn't realize that's what you were doing. Anyway, at 11 minutes you should have 4,500, and you have 3,300, so this is really bad. And you should really be pushing earlier than this too, and you can move this dude into range so that you can kill these stupid cannons. Money's kind of piling up. You're on 3 bases. 2 bases, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. You got your workers down here, but how many did you pull? Not very many. And the reason you couldn't pull very many workers is because you didn't make very many workers, and you're afraid that if you pull too many, it's going to ruin your reinforcements, and that's totally true. You're using this properly. You sieged up so that at just the edge of your range is his ramp, and that's where he tends to bunch up. It's good. You don't want to siege too close because then he doesn't have to go into the bottleneck. And you're going to rip this to shreds extremely easily, and good job. So the general framework of the build was followed really well, and it made for a really easy win. But I'd be worried just about general build cleanliness, and the benchmarks. You know. Oh, double void ray. So 2 Marines at a time is not enough to compete with double void ray. So as soon as you saw the starports cancel the Banshees, start making Vikings. But yeah, game's over. So benchmarks, 6 minutes is 1,000. And that means a tank started, right? And it means, I don't know if it means a Banshee started. I think it might. Yeah, you got to get your factory at 3:30, your starport at 4:30, and you should be starting your Banshee at, I think, 5:50 or something. So it's all the way out to 6 minutes, and you don't even have your starport up yet. And that's bad. And you've got all this gas that you didn't spend on army because of the badness of that. It's likely that you took your gas too early, and that caused this problem. Let me look. Because what you want is 16 guys mining minerals and 3 guys mining gas, 19 workers at, like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. And that gives you soft cap mineral sat, and 3 dudes mining gas is enough to get your factory and enough to get your starport. And then as you go past that 19 worker mark, you're going to start to oversaturate your minerals, and that's when you want to take this second gas. Because I know that gas is extremely important to the build, but if you take it too early, you can't afford to get your factory and your starport on time. So let's see. 3:30 is when you want your starport. It looks like you didn't get gas early enough, your first gas. Because you should have 100 gas at 3:30 off of 1 geyser. So let's check for the 13 gas. All right, gas. Yeah, that's why you took a really late gas. And that's okay. I mean, I don't know if it's okay. The reason that usually most of the builds I've showed you take a late gas, the reason that they take a late gas is to save up for an early expansion. But you're not going to take an early expansion in TvP, so it's silly to get a late gas, I feel like. So you should have enough for a factory at 3:30, but by taking that late gas, you don't have enough for a factory until 3:48. So you're 15, 16, 17, 18 seconds behind, which is 1 full SCV behind, which makes sense because you went from a 13 gas to a 14 gas, which is 1 SCV, which is 17 seconds. So you're exactly 17 seconds behind. And it wouldn't be a big deal if you stayed 17 seconds behind, because what's 17 seconds here or there? So make the factory right away. You're not making the factory, you're not making the factory, you're not making the... There you go. All right. Now, the starport starts exactly 1 minute after the factory. It needs to start the second this factory finishes. Boom. Starport. Go. So 4:50 something is the earliest you could have started your starport, and it's not coming out, and it's not coming out, and it's not coming out, because you don't have any minerals. You have too much gas and not enough minerals, and that's because you got this second refinery before you get the starport. Still not coming out, still not coming out, still not coming out, still not coming out. So there are no scary Protoss attacks that come before 7 minutes, and that means that how strong your army is at 7 minutes is the most important thing in TvP. And how strong your army is at 7 minutes is entirely based on how quickly you get this starport. So the whole like center of the build is based around how quickly can I get that starport out. And so your starport that you really wanted to finish at 550 is now finished at boom 650. So you're a full minute late. And that means that your army spending benchmark, like I said, 6 minutes you wanted 1,000, you're at 7 minutes and you have 1,000. So you're exactly 1 minute behind. And that just comes from getting gas slightly early, missing some SCVs maybe, and having, you know, not constant production. So, like we've said a bunch of times, timing attacks are all about perfection, build perfection, and they're simple builds, which makes it perfectly reasonable to expect perfection. Like big 3-base macro builds, you don't expect perfection. You just get as good as you can, and you set goals for yourself, and you can always improve them because it's impossible to macro perfectly on 3 bases and 800 buildings and whatever, or as close to impossible as one will normally see. But with a timing push, it's not impossible. It's actually perfectly reasonable to expect perfection from anyone because you only have 3 buildings. All you have to do is make sure you use those 3 buildings and get them at the right times. So. At this point, you've got siege mode, so this is 2,900 at 10 minutes. That's 800 behind the benchmark that you set for yourself. Like, you and I did this build together, 1v1, and you had a $3,800 army and an expo and 32 workers at 10 minutes. So you can obviously do it. And he didn't attack you. He didn't even scout you. He has no army. He is not scaring you into messing up the build. You just messed up the build, I don't know, because you're afraid of ladder games or something. So... keep track of your perfection, baby. Perfection is what you should expect. But obviously this was more than good enough to win the game, so whatever.